Welcome to the 2024 recap of Miss Grand International. I'm Dani. Thanks for clicking this episode. If you like episodes like this and if you'd like to access exclusive content, you can do that through channel memberships or by subscribing to queenbeauty.tv, where you can check out those episodes as well as original series like Talk of the Crown, where myself and Luis Portela shares our thoughts about pageant hot topics. Even if you're not a fan of Miss Grand International, please give them some credit for their production value. I'm always so impressed with the show, and this year was no different. I feel like they went above and beyond with this rising platform and the sparklers coming out of the bottom. Now, I do want to say there were rising platforms at Mr. Supranational this year, so, we have seen this before. It's not like the first time it's been done, but I like that it was done in this way. The ladies looked incredible. The one thing that I did notice that I haven't seen elsewhere, and I'm not saying it hasn't happened, was the LED screen that went from the back of the stage and it extended all the way up on the ceiling. It almost mirrored the runway, which was really cool. So I liked that part. The ladies looked incredible in gold. I love when they incorporate the outgoing title holder. That's typically something that Grand does. And that's why it looks like Grand is truly looking for not only someone who is going to work hard for the brand, but also somebody who is a performer that they can feature again and again. So think about using your other talents when you're applying for Grand International. Another advantage of this show not being on primetime TV is that it's not timed down to the second. So we got to see long introductions of the contestants. Each of them had a special moment walking down the runway, and I really like how they used those LEDs on the ceiling to write the contestants' country. After introductions, we went right into special awards, so I'll quickly go over those. Indonesia went home with the Charming by Chuck Cosmetics Award. The Beauty Skin by Haya went to Thailand and Myanmar, and then the Eye Aura Queen went to Myanmar. Now, they also awarded 3 Best National Costume winners, and I'm sort of like, how can you have 3 bests? That doesn't make so much sense to me, but I do still like that we're recognizing the contestants, and all 3 of those ladies were part of my favorites in my episode about national costume that you can check out. So those were Brazil, Honduras, and Ecuador. Congratulations, ladies, you looked beautiful. Just as a reminder, friends, let's be sure to be kind in the comments to all of our contestants and countries. Then we had our Power of the Year award, and that was between Thailand and Myanmar, and then Thailand ended up going home with that award, which advanced her automatically into the top 20, and then that kicked off our top 20. It was really tough this year. The ladies had great performances for prelims. You can check out my other recaps of their performances, but there were a couple of exclusions and ladies that I was hopeful would be in our top 20 and they weren't, which I get it. It was really tough. And those ladies were Puerto Rico, and I was concerned by her very safe gown performance. I did talk about that. Then we had USA, but then the one that really shocked me was Venezuela, because I feel like she had a great interview. She looked stunning on stage. I can't tell you what happened. Now let's talk about our swimsuit performances of our top 20. Here were my thoughts and standouts. Brazil had a very nice and strong opening spin turn. This was my favorite performance from her of the entire night. I loved this. I thought this was stronger than prelims, and I was just obsessed with the entire thing. No wonder she ended up going home with the Best Swimsuit Award. Curaçao has been one of my favorites, and I had a feeling she was going to make that top 20 cut. I do wish that she would have gone further, but I'm not a judge. So I really like her opening. I felt like it was very grand and it was creative. She looked amazing going down the runway, which I always expect from her. And then I like that she finished with a very grand pose at the end. The other thing I should talk about is the rising platform, which I thought was really cool. It was fun and creative, and I like to see what each of the ladies did with it. Another one of my top favorites for swim is Dominican Republic, and at this moment of the show I was like, how in the world is anyone gonna narrow this down? I thought that the ladies just looked so amazing, and I loved Dominican Republic's performance. It was one of my top picks. At that point, that would have been one of my top 5 picks for swim. France did her wig reveal again like she did in prelims, but I don't feel like it was as effective because people had already seen it, and so the audience didn't really react to it, but she still did such a great job for swim. I just don't think that she needed the reveal for finals. India had a really nice spin opening. She's so gorgeous, and I do like that she tried out this tricky little transition off of stairs, which I've been seeing a little bit more across social media. And it's not easy to do, especially I would say when you're thinking about the fact that this platform could be moving on you. But I think that she did a great job with that. I do feel like her poses at the end could have been a little bit cleaner, but I felt like that as well, even for prelims for her. I feel like her strength is gown. I've talked about this before. If your walk still needs improvement, like fuller extension of the legs, then you're probably going to be scoring higher in gown than swim, because gown is concealing the legs and keeping even more of the attention up towards the face. Indonesia did her signature pose at the top of the stairs, which I thought was just fabulous. Her hair was so beautiful, it was just bouncing on stage. This was just a solid performance that she finished with great poses. She was very prepared. Mexico, I love this performance. This right here was one of my top 5 performances that made me go, wow. I feel like she just executed everything that she planned to do so perfectly. There were no hesitations. She looked incredible, and all the poses really accentuated her body. Myanmar for me was another top 5 swim performance. That's where I would put this. I just feel like it was so precise and so clean, and then she was confident on top of it, and so she really stood out here to me. She definitely deserved to move forward. Peru had a really great opening pose that I think accentuated her legs. She had a lot of other transitions and hand movements that I would define as Miss Grand International. Of course, she has a wonderful walk, and I love the way that she ended this routine. She definitely deserved to be moving on. What I appreciate about her is that she's grand, but she's also not overdoing anything. Philippines had a great pose at the top of the platform. Then when she got off of it, she had some wonderfully choreographed, tricky sort of pivot spin turns planned. But what I really loved about her performance is that right after she got off of the platform, she got that eye contact with the camera. She held that. Then when she got to the end of the runway, she hit her poses and she did not wobble. So watch and learn. Amazing performance. This one stood out. United Kingdom, I want to mention her because I did love her so much during prelims. I just felt like this performance was a little bit safe, and it would have made it difficult to move on or think of her in that top 5 realm, but I still really liked her. The other thing I noticed for the first time is they're all wearing Miss Grand International swimsuits. And so when Nawat talks about the 4 Bs, specifically business, he is backing that up. It makes so much sense to be able to feature your own swimwear line during the show so that you can pull in 100% of those profits. Of course, it's not going to be without its challenges. That's not the easiest thing to do, is start a swimwear line. But if you have the time and the resources, it makes a lot of sense, because I have to say, I did notice the suits and the little chain details, and I thought that they all looked great. I loved it. I would wear those swimsuits too. After this, Brazil won Best in Swimsuit, and then Indonesia won Popular Vote, which meant that she moved on automatically into the top 10. Now we had speeches for Stop the War and Violence, and I will say, normally when I hear these speeches, there's a couple things that really stand out to me in the speeches, or some contestants deliver these in a way where they're really pulling at my heartstrings, or they say something clever that captures my attention, that's memorable. And I will say overall, I felt like the speeches were pretty much on a level playing field. There wasn't anything very unexpected in them, unfortunately. One thing I noticed though is that India, Indonesia, and then Myanmar, they all spoke very passionately. So although the messages weren't very unique or things that we haven't heard before or even in a new way, you could tell that there was a very big difference between their delivery and other contestants. That's how I feel about the speeches. I don't think we need to go into detail about them because, like I said, there wasn't really anything in there that I was like, wow, about, but you can go check them out for yourself and let me know what you think. Then our outgoing title holder, I have to say, so she went on stage, she presented a little speech, and she just looked so beautiful. Let's just look at this look for a moment and appreciate it. And also I really love that at the very end of this, they had all of these pictures of the other title holders, I believe, right? That wasn't just pictures of her. I don't think so. I think I couldn't really tell. I didn't really think about that. Maybe they were, but I think that they're the other former title holders, which I thought was beautiful. Let's get into the top 10 for gown, which I'm so excited about. So Brazil, I prefer this finals look to her preliminary look where she wore the gold jumpsuit. I do feel like what matters is the performance, and I do feel like this performance was so much better than her preliminary performance where she struggled with that overskirt. But do I like the black gown on her? No, I did not love this color for finals, I feel like it just didn't really do anything on stage. Dominican Republic was gorgeous in this gold dress, and I really loved her slow motion spin turn at the end. I thought that was so beautiful. For me, I would have put her in the top 5 for this. Oh, that's the other thing that I should mention, is that I love the slow-mo shots of the contestants at the end of the runway. This is something that we also get to see at Miss France, but I love it during a show. I feel like it's so special. Let me also say this, I loved France's ending pose, but I didn't love that gown. And I feel like one of the ways to win any pageant is to ask yourself, like, can I see the crown being put on my head in this gown? Does this gown make sense for this particular pageant system? And I feel like France's gown was missing the mark in that aspect because there was just so much going on there. The corset was a different color than the skirt, and then there was sort of like an exposed rhinestone panty, and then the stones weren't the same as on the bottom. India looked so beautiful, and I thought that this gown was so smart. It was really neat. So it had green on top, blue stones on the bottom, and then these pieces that looked like metallic feathers in a way. She looked lovely, but I will say I do prefer the pink color she wore to prelims on her complexion. Something about that makeup was so iconic and just so memorable. I was obsessed with it. But what was really nice about this gown for finals is that the green in the top of the dress really complemented the grand crown at the end of the day. And then also the gold and the gold details. So it was such a beautiful and smart crowning dress. And I feel like the ladies did a really great job for gown, but what stood out to me were their ending poses, and she had one of my favorite ending poses. Indonesia, I loved this gown. Honestly, with this, I had her in my top 5. I loved this look on her. I loved her pose at the end of the runway. Obsessed. Myanmar wore a very unique gown. I did not expect to see her in this soft pink and purple, but I think she stood out, I think she was beautiful, and she nailed that pose at the end. Philippines did a little cape reveal that I did not even expect, and I have noticed that Philippines tends to wear a colorful jewel tone or a bright gown for prelims, and then they switch over to the safer metallic type of look for finals. And that's the same thing that happened when Samantha Bernardo was first runner-up as well. And weirdly enough, I much preferred Samantha in that green gown versus the gold. I feel like the gold fell flat on stage, and I did have that feeling with CJ as well, where I was like, gosh, I actually would have preferred her in a color. But the one thing I have to say is that she did have my favorite just ending pose and moment at the end of the runway. It just worked out so well for her. The way that she tossed up that chiffon, so iconic. For gowns specifically, I really liked India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Dominican Republic, but the ladies all did so well. Honestly, that's what happens when you judge a pageant. It's so subjective and it's just personal preference, and I'm sure a lot of you watching saw the same pageant and were like, oh, I had some different favorites. Those ladies were not all in the top 5, but let's talk about our top 5 in the question that they were asked. Here's one thing I don't love. At Grand, they all get the same question and they don't have headphones on. Please just put the headphones on at the end. I just feel like it's an unfair advantage. So let's talk about it. They had 45 seconds to answer this. What do you think is the most critical issue today that needs to be resolved, and what solutions do you propose? For the top 5, I thought that they all gave really great answers. Philippines' pressing issue was war and violence, and I was like, oh, she's so lucky that she went first, because obviously with that being the theme at Grand, it just made so much sense. And the other ladies, I would bet they were like, oh, she took the one I wanted to say. But she also talked about treating one another as humans and respectfully, because we all share the same world, and that we should treat one another as brothers and sisters. So nothing that we haven't heard before. The answer was good. It was solid. I would say it's more so about the way that she presented this answer, because she spoke clearly and very confidently. Now, Brazil's answer was education. She has talked about that. She also talked about that during her top 10 speech. So this was very, very on brand for her. And I think that, of course, it's a very relevant issue and something that we do need change for, right? Accessibility to education, and then also improving education. So that was important. And also, I want to mention about her and her delivery. She just seemed so sweet, so sweet. sweet. Now we have India, and she said overpopulation and a lack of resources. She talked about being able to provide access to birth control for people, and that we need to stop fighting each other and make sure that there's enough resources for everyone on the planet. Since we do get a lot of questions about sustainability, I think it's important to talk about both sides of this answer, because you might actually get a question like this. I do hear ones like this coming up, ones about overpopulation, but then I also hear the other side of this argument where people are saying, but we're not repopulating enough in a lot of countries. Our birth rates are dipping so low that in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, we're not gonna have a workforce that'll be big enough to support the infrastructure of the country. And so it's a really interesting topic, talking about decreasing populations versus increasing. And I just wanted to put that on your radar if you're preparing for a pageant, so that you can go and do your own research, kind of decide how you feel about the issue, or maybe practice potential questions that has to do with this. France talked about media, and it sounded like she was talking about the pros and the cons of this. Now, unfortunately, she did cut herself off a little bit too short in this answer. I feel like she realized, uh-oh, I'm about to ramble, and I don't know what to say next, so I might as well cut it off, and I feel like that affected her placement. Myanmar talked about the overuse of plastic. She encouraged people to use paper and then reduce, reuse, and recycle so that we can all live longer. And I don't think that this was a bad answer, but I feel like at this point during the show, India and Philippines were so strong during prelims that you really needed something to seal the deal for you and put you leaps and bounds ahead of them in order to move past them. So that is such a tough place to be in when you're a contestant. It's like, okay, we have these other ladies that have been very, very consistent. They're doing very well. They're probably up there in the judges' top 2. How do I move past 2 ladies in terms of score? Well, you gotta do quite a lot to be able to get a judge to go, oh, that's actually my winner. Never mind, forget my other favorites. Now after this, we were waiting for crowning, and we got to learn that the Miss Grand Voice Award went to Trinidad and Tobago. Another unique thing about Grand is that they acknowledge the ladies who didn't move into the top 5 as 5th runners up, and they get a crown and sash. Now let's talk about our placements. 4th runner up went to Brazil. 3rd runner up went to France, and I think I was on the fence about that. I felt like that could go either way, where France would get 3rd or 4th runner up because of her answer. Then we have 2nd runner up, who was Myanmar, and then we have Philippines, who ended up as 1st runner up again, so close, and then India is our new queen. I also really liked that during the crowning, when they were holding hands, that their flags were on the side of the stage. That was so cool. So congratulations to all of the ladies that accomplished so much during the entire journey of pursuing that golden crown. I'm very excited for you. And there is something that I have to mention at the end of this episode, because when I did my interview episode, I personally loved the pressing questions that Philippines and India were getting in the interview. And I read different comments from people who felt that these questions were somehow unfair. So I want to give you a different side of this. I want to give you a different insider perspective. So something that I learned while I was judging was that when contestants walk into the interview room, if they don't already sound prepared, or if they don't immediately come across as confident, or sometimes if they look a little bit frightened, judges will typically ask them easier questions, because we feel like, well, it doesn't look like you're really prepared for the hard-hitting ones, so we're going to give you the easy ones, so this is not a traumatic experience. So on the flip side of that, if a contestant comes in and she looks so prepared and she's confident, she sounds very, very confident, oftentimes a judge will ask her a very challenging question because they feel like she's up for the challenge. They want to press her and they want to see, well, you know what, like, you look really good, but are you really ready for this title? Really? Like, do you think you can really do this? And that is a moment that you can always flip and turn around and use it to prove to the judges, yes, I am the one. So one thing I loved when I was competing in pageants that I noticed was a common denominator is when I lost certain titles, I tended to get easier questions in my interview. I noticed that. And then in the pageants where I was placing or winning, I got the more challenging questions. And those are actually such a gift and a blessing in disguise, because those are the questions that can really sway the judge. It can really push them towards scoring you higher because they're like, wait a second, I liked her already, and I'm actually shocked at how well she really answered this question. I thought she was prepared. I didn't know she was this prepared. So I just want you to keep that in mind if you're competing in a pageant. When you get those questions that are really, really difficult and pressing, it's because the judge wants to challenge you and they want to see if you're up for that challenge. But they're typically asking those difficult questions to contestants who they're really interested in. So look out for that. I hope that can give you a little bit of perspective and encouragement the next time that you're in a competition, or maybe it'll help you to see the interview process in a different way. But thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I hope to see you at another one really soon. Just as a reminder, friends, let's be sure to be kind in the comments to all of our contestants and countries.